Welcome back to the Altars and Ashes podcast, where we believe the Lord's kingdom still advances, the fire still burns, and God is rebuilding his people through households of faith. Beowulf Diego Fleming.
I'm Austin Tucker.
And I'm Robbie Stringer.
And today we've got a very special episode for you. This is episode 20, and so we wanted to slow things down a bit and do something reflective. We had a lot of deep, engaging podcasts this season, and so we wanted to do something just a little bit fun. So today we are going to talk about the books that formed us as the men that we are today. And so just to be clear right out of the gate, this is not like a top 10 book list that you need to go out and buy and read for 2026. This is just a list of books that worked on us in some way, shape, or form. Maybe they corrected something about us. Maybe they cost us something. But just want to do something fun and talk about the books that have made us the men we are today. So, and it's been a few weeks since we recorded, guys. So how you doing? You guys both traveled for Christmas?
Oh, yeah. You know, I think with today being a book review, BD, maybe you should go by Beautiful Disaster Fleming.
Maybe so. Beautiful Disaster.
No, if it's books, Beowulf is probably
that's
the way to go.
You got what I was doing there, Robert.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I missed that. Yeah.
He's not cultured enough.
Yeah. He's like, who's Beowulf? That's funny. Well, so also just from the outset, we are doing something a little bit different this time. We are not all together, which means that I can't even blow smoke in Robbie's face. So that stinks for me, but he can actually breathe. So that's
I will
good for
choke
him.
in spirit.
But if we're a little disconnected, it's because we can't even see each other really. But anyway, this should be a good, fun conversation. None of us know what books we picked. So in order to try and have some sort of structure around this, what we did is categorized it into different lanes of conversation. So I'm going to lay out the different lanes and then we can jump right in. Does that sound good, man?
Sounds awesome.
Yeah, you lay out the lanes, and I will just ignore them and just
you will just do whatever you want to do.
Yep.
What is your motto, Robbie? I do what I want.
I do what I want. Yeah.
All right. So the different categories, if you want to call them that, is 1, books that changed how we see God. 2, books that changed how we see the world. 3, books that forced us to rethink history. Category 4, books that changed how we see ourselves as men. Category 5, books that made us feel the weight of life. Category 6, books that formed the mind. And then the final category, category 7, books that changed how we actually live day to day. So, category 1, books that changed how we see God. I'm going to go first. And again, we don't know what each of us have, but my book, the first one is Providence by John Piper. Either one of you guys read that one?
Yes, that's a hefty read.
I have. I actually think you gave me a copy.
We got it for free at the Founders Conference and brought you one back.
That's right. Yeah.
So it wasn't like I just bought it for you out of the kindness of my heart. We did get it for free.
It's a very thick book and looks very nice on my shelf because it makes me look. But I actually have read it also. So
yeah, it's a tome. But one of the things that it did for me is, it. Let me think how to say this. It collapsed the gap between what I said about what I believed about God and how I actually lived. And so I, of course, believed in God's sovereignty, but a lot of times I found that I was living as if God governed the outcome, but it's almost like the outcome just happened and in his providence wasn't a part of that. And so it forced me to see that God is not reacting to events at all, right? He is actively governing them. And that means even the frustrations and sufferings that we have in life doesn't mean that he's the author of sin or anything like that, but he is sovereign over, as Austin always says, the ends and the means.
So I only got about halfway through that book. It felt overly repetitive, but it was really good what I got.
Yeah.
But and really, it's John Piper's magnum opus. It is that's and he openly declared that this is the book of the foundation of his entire ministry philosophy spelled out in a theological term. And it's one of those books that I've always said I'm going to go back to, but I haven't picked it up yet. It is,
This
it,
may be your motivation to do that.
yeah. Well, everybody I've talked to that finished it loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I liked about that book, I think, was just it is a lot, and it
Mhm.
is I guess you could see it as kind of repetitive, but I guess the word I would use is exhaustive
Yeah.
in that it brings out, like, every verse in the Bible about God's sovereignty and his providence
Mhm.
and how he's just in control, and it's kind of amazing how much that is in the Bible, and I think that's really what struck me is just how much really is there. You can kind of forget that when you're not really thinking about it or you're reading and you kinda don't notice it or something because 'cause you're thinking about some other aspect, but when you really look at
Right.
all and put it together, it is pretty astounding.
Well,
Yeah.
I tell you, not to trump over you, but if I was to pick my book, it would be the Bible. The
You are so
Bible.
you are so holy.
um, no, I tell you a book. So early in my Reformation, early in that first time you start reading the Bible, and all of a sudden you're starting to see in all the epistles and all the writings that God is sovereign over all things.
Mhm.
I remember going through a crisis of how can God be sovereign and why should I do anything? So I almost went through a crisis of becoming a fatalist. And
Mhm.
I think a lot of young people do that. And of course, fatalism does not line up with the scripture. That's why I always say God ordains the ends and the means.
Mhm.
But the book that really helped me bring everything together and brought me into a new level of Christian maturity is a book written by J.I. Packer, and that's Evangelism and the Sovereignty of God.
Oh, yeah. That one is good.
Yeah. That book, it all of a sudden I went from going, okay,
Mm.
God ordained the ends and the means. That's where I got that from, was from him.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it helped me see that God is so sovereign that he knows the makeup, he laid it all out, and
Mhm.
that God made me a co-laborer with him, and this was all part of his plan. It's probably been, oh goodness, that's one I need to pick up again. It's probably been 15 years since I've read it, but
I just read that one in, like, 2023, so it's not
oh,
been that long ago. That was really good. You're right, and it's not like it's not like Providence where it's this huge book, that you've gotta work your way through. It was one that you could finish in a week or weekend.
and probably the fun read of the books would be also early in my Christianity, Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. I could see that one. And, interestingly, since we just came off of our episode of theological triage, if you want to dig into that, mere Christianity is what that's all about. Like, what are the essential things that you should believe in order to be a Christian?
And see, C.S. Lewis opens up in that book, and he talks about the fact that I am not a theologian,
Hmm.
that he is a writer, a thinker. He's an apologist. He don't call himself that at that particular moment. But the first 3 chapters are basically dedicated to the ontological argument for God and morality and the fact that reason and logic exist, therefore God has to exist. And it is one of those Mere Christianity is one of those books that starts off with God must exist, and if God exists, then A, B, and C. It's one of those books that I think is good for every Christian to read, but I also think it will teeter some people towards more of an Arminian outlook if not careful.
I could see that. Yeah, I could see that. That's a good call out. Robbie, I got two more, but I want to hear one of yours.
Yeah, so one of the most influential I'm actually gonna cheat here,
Okay.
because I'm gonna mention 2 books, but the reason is because they are pretty close to the same topic, and they are the same author, so in my mind, they're kind of almost like one
One
big
book,
book.
sort of. Yeah.
So this book plays into the origin story of me as far as coming to Reformed Christianity,
Okay.
because I did not grow up in anything Reformed or Calvinistic. I wouldn't even know what you meant by Reformed, and I would have thought as Calvinism is kind of a bad word
Hmm.
because I was always taught that Calvinism, election, that type of stuff, it basically leads you to not tell people about Jesus. That's what I
What we
was
were
told.
told.
Yeah.
Which is what you were talking about, Austin. That was part of why that was such a big impact to you, is because you had been taught that. But
Well, not to mention history itself plays out that the biggest missionaries and evangelist movements have all
we're
been
Calvinist. Yeah.
they're all
Right.
Calvinist. Yeah. I'm
Yep.
sorry, Robbie. Go
Yep.
ahead.
Yeah. So what happened is completely unintentionally, almost like God's sovereign or something. But I was at a bookstore, and like a Books A Million or something like that. And I was in the Christian section, and I picked up two books that looked interesting to me. And I didn't and it was by an author who I just recently discovered, named John MacArthur.
Who's this guy? Who's this guy?
And I didn't know who he was. I read one other book by him that I just picked up in a bookstore that looked pretty interesting. I liked it. I had no idea that John MacArthur was Calvinist. I had no idea, because the topic of that book, the first book I'd read, it just didn't deal with anything related to that, and I just didn't know. And so I picked up two more, and one of them was called 12 Ordinary Men. It's a book about the
Yes.
12 disciples. That also didn't really lead me to, think about Calvinism in any of the 5 points or anything like that. But then I read the other book that I picked up, and it's a book called Hard to Believe.
Hmm.
And it is very much related to the idea of perseverance of the saints.
Mm-hmm.
And I had always been told, it wasn't said this way to me in these exact words, but my understanding was that being saved was primarily intellectual.
Yeah.
If you just believe these doctrines, you can essentially sin as much as you want. You can abandon the faith, and there doesn't need to be any like depth or realness to your faith. Now to be fair, we weren't encouraged to act that way. We were told we should follow the Lord and grow in our faith and show our faith, but it wasn't required. You just had to believe, and you could live entirely evil. And so the book Hard to Believe, and then his other book kind of about this general topic called The Gospel According to Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And what struck me was I said, I've not heard this taught before.
Mm.
And what really struck me was the way that he had scripture for all of it.
To back it up. Yep.
And I said, why haven't I seen that verse before? I've read Matthew. I've read the Gospels before. How have I never noticed that Jesus said that? And it was time after time, and it really struck me that this is what the Bible says. And so when I realized that it was one, and then when I realized that what I was now believing and was seeing as biblical was one of the 5 points of Calvinism, it really, I really had to ask, could some of the other points be accurate as well? And that kind of is what led me started to go down that journey, of reading things, finding authors I'd never known about before,
Mhm.
thinking about things that I'd never thought about before, and really just kind of seeing what the scriptures taught about that. And it really, I feel like I owe a lot to John MacArthur for that, because not only did I discover through him about, the Reformed beliefs of salvation, but also he brought, and people that he kind of exposed me to through him, really exposed me, I feel like, to a teaching at a greater depth than I had before. There's something about Reformed pastors, your MacArthur and Sproul and some of the others, that I appreciate. I very much appreciate the churches I grew up in. They gave me a love for the Bible. They gave me the gospel, but there was something in me that wanted something deeper that I was
Mm.
not getting, and I didn't know that until I got it. And I said, "I love this,"
Yeah. You tasted it, and you're like, I
y
want more of that.
yes, exactly, exactly. And so, it not only the content of the book, but the depth of that led me to other authors. It made it very influential to me. So that is the more well known of those two is The Gospel According to Jesus by John MacArthur.
I have that on my shelf and I've never picked it up.
Yeah, and he also has, going to your other book, The 12 Ordinary Men. He actually has one called, I think, 12 Ordinary Women as well.
Yes, I've read that. I actually let years ago, I let someone borrow it and I never got it back.
Never got it back.
But yeah,
That happens.
but I
I
did
wonder
read it.
how many books I've lost over the years.
Doing that same exact thing.
Oh, yeah. You know, with in this particular category, what Brother Robbie was saying, I think since we're on books, I think it'd be interesting to point out every single commentary that Baptists trust and use. So, like, even the Baptists who say, we're not Calvinist or we can't stand, it's Matthew Henry, it's John Gill,
Mhm.
it's Hobbes. You know what all these men have in common? They're all Calvinists.
Yeah.
They're all
I mean, even
Calvinists, they're
Grudem.
all Reformed. Yeah,
Yeah.
even Warren Wiersbe, which is
Mhm.
from the fundamental circle, was Calvinistic.
Mm.
So, like, they use a lot of Warren Wiersbe. I grew up with that Baptist, the Spurgeon, and Brother Robbie is very right. The greatest thinkers and writers of every generation of the Christian when it comes to the pulpit has been the Reformed preachers.
Yeah. That's good. I've got 2 more in this category. Can I throw those out real quick?
Yeah, I have one more.
Okay. So, the first one that I said was Providence by John Piper. And I really, really struggled on this one because I didn't want to pull another Piper book, but I had to because the way that Robbie just talked about, not hard truths. What was it called? What did you say it was, Robbie?
Hard to believe.
Hard to believe, right. That's exactly the same thing that happened with me with this book. It's God's Passion for His Glory
That
by
is a
John
good
Piper.
book.
Yeah, and that's the one where he introduces Christian hedonism.
Yep.
And Jonathan Edwards, and he talks about how Jonathan Edwards like lit his flame, and he talks about God is most glorified in us when we are most satisfied in Him, and it really just reframed God's glory as the center of reality, not some abstract doctrine. And so that book was the one that took me down the path for reforming. And then, and I'm going to throw this other one out there and I'll let you go, Austin. The other one that I've got in this category is The Valley of Vision. And that's a book of Puritan prayers. That book took my prayer life to a different level. And it still is nowhere near what theirs was. But like the ability for them to put into words feelings and repentance and humility and like dependence on God was just like, I didn't know somebody could pray that way.
Yeah.
So have you guys read The Valley of Vision?
Oh yeah, that's one. It's on my shelf. That book really inspired me to write out my prayers more. And the
Mhm.
same thing, it's like, because I write my prayers, and I even have that one book that's in waiting to be published where
Mhm.
I have 1 year's worth of prayers written out. And I read my prayers and I think these are good, and I go read theirs and go, man,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Nothing.
yeah. But, my book is more of a reference book that I found myself reading all the way through probably only 5 years ago, and it's
Uh-huh.
one that I wish I'd have picked up, and it's the modern exposition of the 1689 Baptist Confession written by Sam Waldron.
Ooh,
Uh,
yeah.
so he goes chapter by chapter and explains the language difference between the Presbyterians, between the Baptists, and explains what's actually going on, and it brings to light, like, some of the wording that's used in that old confession of faith. I just think nothing of it, and then Sam Waldron points out why they changed one word and how it changes the meaning and how it deepens, and I'm like, "Man, I wish I'd thought that deep about" John Piper. I think he was a gateway drug for all 3 of us, if
Probably,
you
yeah.
will.
I
Eh,
don't get my political theory from John Piper.
no,
But
but,
theologically, yeah.
you know, it's one of those. I forget right why I brought John Piper up. Oh, John Piper. He always talks about the importance of being specific with our words.
Mm,
And something those brothers had in the 17th century is that they were very careful and specific with their words.
yes.
And
Yes.
they really thought through these confessions. That was one of the most beautiful confessions, both the 1600 confessions,
Mhm.
beautiful confessions. And it's just neat to dive into Baptist history and go, oh, they didn't just pick that word randomly. They picked that
Right.
because that best magnified God's nature. And it was a good book.
Yeah. What was it called again?
It's called The Modern Exposition of the 1689 Baptist Confession.
Is it the big, like, red one?
No, that's his
Okay.
new one.
Okay.
That one's more about covenantal theology.
Okay.
This is more just an exposition through through the 1689. Like, if you ever decide to teach through the 1689,
That's the one to go through.
this would be the book to use. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, you'll have to let me borrow that one. I've not read it. I do have the big red one, but it's one of those that you're like, I gotta make sure I plan 6 months to get through that one.
Yeah.
Robbie, you have any more in that category?
No, I think
Books
I'm good
that
there.
change how we see God. Okay. So next category. I'm really excited about hearing your guys' ones for this one. Books that changed how we see the world. And so this is like books that helped you develop your worldview, what made your faith like real, or what collapsed your faith, or like what made you more alert to how, truth is framed. And so my first one is Total Truth by Nancy Pearcey. Either one of you guys read that?
Yes.
I'm trying to think. I've read some Nancy Pearcey books. I don't think I've read that one.
Okay. So she studied under Francis Schaeffer. And this book gave me categories of thought that I didn't even know I was missing. And so, like, I had unknowingly absorbed the idea that Christianity, belonged in your private life. And she talks about, I think because of Schaeffer, like the upper story or the lower story and the upper story, and how, like, inevitably what we do is we think that we've allowed the world to tell us that Christianity belongs on Sunday morning. Okay. And as long as you keep it in Sunday morning, you have no problems. But the moment that you bring it into the upper story where all these real things are at, like science and, and all these philosophy and stuff like that, the moment that you bring it into the real world as an intellectual pursuit, then you've got problems. And so it made it impossible for me to treat faith as like a preference. It clarified my worldview. So that was a really impactful book. And I think I have more highlights. And Austin, you make fun of me for highlighting like everything and underlining everything.
Yes.
That book, you probably couldn't read the book now because it's so highlighted and marked up. But that was a really good one.
So I think what I'm gonna give my book for this category real quick. But before I say that, one thing I felt that was interesting, Beowulf, that you said was that you started thinking in ways that you did not even know like existed.
Yep.
And I think for some people who might be listening to this that might be saying, "Well, I'm not much of a reader,"
Mhm.
or something like that. Why are they talking about this?
Books. Yeah.
It's because every time we read a book, we are exposed to ideas that are not our own.
Mhm.
And it doesn't have to be books, of course. It could be it could be an audiobook, it could be a podcast, it could be a YouTube video or video series on some kind of whatever platform. But the more people, like good wise people, that you expose yourself to, you're gonna find out things that you're gonna learn things you didn't know that you didn't know. Like, you
Yep.
didn't even know it was out there.
Yep.
And so I think that's really important. And this next book is probably outside of the Bible, of course, Austin,
Mhm.
is probably one of the it might be the most influential book to me. And that is because
Can I guess real quick? Is it
what
by an Indian author?
it is.
I knew it.
It
Okay.
is.
Okay.
Oh.
Go ahead.
It
Go ahead.
is.
Go ahead. Yeah.
And the reason I wanted to do mine real quick because I let Austin borrow this. And I was scared he was going to take it.
Yeah.
It's
So
on my
I wanted
list.
I
Yeah.
wanted to make sure he didn't get to. But this is a book called because this category is the books that changed how we see the world. This book is called The Book That Made Your World. And it really kind of goes through, it's by an author named, and as Beowulf mentioned, he's Indian, and by Indian I mean Indian, not Native American. And
So he's not so he's like the gas station Indian.
I I'm not going to answer.
Not the tomahawk one.
Anyway, his name is Vishal Mangalwadi, and he wrote this book, and it's called The Book That Made Your World. And the book he's talking about is the Bible. And it says how the Bible created the soul of Western civilization.
Mhm.
And so this is a Easterner, he's from Asia, and he's explaining about how the West was created by the Bible. And I heard people say things like that growing up, but they never really told me how. And then when you start reading non-Christian authors, they start to deny stuff like that. But this book really just shows about how so many of the great things that we like appreciate about Western society that is made that we feel very blessed by and that has made us so successful, of how those ideas came from the Bible. And he doesn't just make the claim, but he cites the books, he quotes the people, and it really shows the ways in which the Bible has really affected the world that we live in, and the danger that comes from undermining the Bible, because when we undermine that, we undermine the things that made our society blessed.
Yeah.
That is on my list. That was on my list for things that changed the way I view history.
Oh,
Um,
that's good.
so you beat me. I'm not gonna. I'll come back to it later, but you removed one from my list. Either way, that particular book definitely had effect on me the way I view the world in general and Western society that I so enjoy, and don't always realize how much Christianity, even in our postmodern society, still kind of rules in our culture. I don't know if you know what I mean. We are still enjoying the fruits
Of
of our
Christendom.
biblical founding. Yeah, our
Yes,
Christendom for
for sure.
sure.
Lots of secular people espouse biblical ideas all the time. They just don't know that they're biblical.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And I mean, look, I just wrote a chapter for a book I'm working on right now on monoculture, and it was talking about how, like, to build a Christian borough, you have to have similar cultures. And one of the things that you're talking about, though, is like even the fact that we stop at red lights. Vodi talked about this. When he went to Africa, he realized he took for granted so many of the things that Western culture had, that Christendom had built, that if Christendom wasn't there, they never had. And it was like he was talking about how at a four-way stop, we all stop and we follow the rules and we go when we're supposed to go. And in other places, like in the middle of India or Vietnam or Africa, like it's just free for all. Like there's no rules. And so, like, our world is still shaped by the Bible and the Christian thought and Christian morality. And that's why, a lot of times one of the things that people talk about with abortion is like, it's just a clump of cells or whatever. And if it's somebody that is talking against abortion, they say, well, it's murder. You can see them say, like, be confused. It's like, it's not murder, it's not a person. And then we start going back to just developing the fact that what a personhood is and stuff like that. So anyway, long story short, I really need to read that one. Robbie, you mentioned that in a sermon one time and I picked it up, but I've not read it yet. So this is an
Yeah,
impetus to go read that one.
he has another one that's kind of like a spiritual sequel called "This Book Changed Everything," that has the ssimilar concept. And another book I read by him and I didn't realize I was being exposed to postmillennialism.
Mm,
I didn't even know what that was, but I believe called Truth and Transformation. And it's
Okay.
basically about how to try to reform societies
wow.
using the Bible. And I wasn't even sure what I was reading, because in my mind, like, society just keeps getting worse.
Yeah. Right. Right.
But he had a much more positive view of the world and how the Bible could do that. And of course, we're also kind of taught that the Bible's not supposed to affect culture and
Yeah.
society
Of
and
course.
such.
Right.
And so, these types of books really showed me not only should the ideas of the Bible affect all these different areas, but they have,
Right.
and it's been an objective blessing to the
Yep.
world.
Amen. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome.
That is definitely that's a new realm for me over the last few years. Again, because being raised that the world's just gonna get worse and worse. But then you start reading history and you start reading, some of, Rome and Greece, and all of a sudden you realize it's been way worse. The Bible's transformed, it's transformed us before, and it's done this several times in history where cultures have been reformed by the Bible. And so, yes, that book and that leads to my book, or the newest book, 'cause I have 3 in this category. Andrew Isker's The Boniface
Great one.
Option.
That's a great one. Yeah.
It's an easy read. I mean, it's what, like 3 hours? It's an easy read, and but it just kind of reshaped what I already knew, but in a very simplistic, historical way.
Mm-hmm.
You just take down the tree,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So,
Yeah, that's a good one. He just republished it with New Christendom Press, by the way.
did he?
Yep. Yep.
We just I need to know when we get him to republish it with Dust and Glory Media.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. Maybe his follow up. We'll see.
Yeah.
If anybody
And
has any contacts with Andrew Isker, you
yeah.
let us know.
An old book would be Orthodoxy by
Mm,
Chesterton,
yeah.
and
I
then
have that on my Kindle, but I haven't read it yet.
it's a very verbose reading, and I'm warning you ahead of time. The way Chesterton writes, sometimes it's tongue in cheek, and you don't realize it, and you go back and you read, go, oh, it's
You do not try to read. If you're not a reader, don't read Chesterton right away. Start with C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis is a good introduction to Chesterton.
well. See, I actually it took me two tries. So I picked up the book Orthodoxy like probably 3 years ago because everybody I love talks about it, and I read and I got through it, but I didn't really get through it.
Right. Right.
The second time I picked it up, I was listening on audiobook while I read.
Okay.
And I it's just because the way things are worded, all of a sudden my brain snapped on and I started jiving with it and
Okay.
understanding. And it's just a very complex way. It's kind of like if I was to talk about a similar work, but not necessarily dealing with orthodoxy, it would be Notes from the Tilt-A-Whirl
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
by N.D. Wilson. Similar writing style, except for modern. And that made me start looking at the world with greater wonder. In fact, if there's one book I could recommend everybody pick up and read, and you will be able to read this book, even if you're a beginning reader, would be N.D. Wilson's Notes from the Tilt-A-Whirl.
Yeah, it's a
It
great book.
will allow you to see the world with fresher eyes of wonder.
Now, was that one of your books, Notes from, or is that an honorable mention?
No, that's one of my books.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, in this category.
Okay. So my second one for this category is 1984 by George Orwell. So reading that one made me realize how easy it is for language to be manipulated, for memory to just be erased, and to punish dissent. And so like it made me realize that there are real forces that want to silence speech, to control narratives, and then to shame anybody that goes against that narrative. And so, obviously not a Christian book, that one wasn't, but
Definitely not.
was really impactful for me to read. And I was like, wow, like it opened my eyes. I remember reading it. That was one of the books that I was reading on lunch breaks as a branch manager. And I was just like going back in like, oh my God, I got all this, thoughts and couldn't really get them out.
That's a great book. That's right there with Fahrenheit 451 as far as like and The Giver. Those are all kind
Oh
of
yeah,
like
The Giver.
this
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, The Giver.
utopia mindset. But I tell you, out of all those in that category, 1984, that gentleman had to be some of the stuff he wrote as I'm reading it, I'm like, ooh, man, that is dark.
Yeah.
He would go so dark it would make me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That book, it's a very good book and really does get you to think. And the thing that hit me the most was the control of language
Yes.
in that book, because I never really thought about that before. Because if you control language and words, you control thought.
And don't you see it all the time now?
Yes.
All the time. People just trying to control words. I mean, Austin, you preach on that all the time. I'm talking about the definition of love changing. That is controlling words. And once you control the words, you control the narrative.
I will say, if you want to read 1984, it's a good book. But if you're looking for an encouraging read,
It's not that.
it's not. It's definitely not that. I read it not that long ago. I'd heard about it for the longest time,
Uh-huh.
and I read it, and
It's by
Man,
George Orwell, by the way.
yeah,
I didn't say that.
those last several chapters,
Mm-hmm.
I kept waiting for things to get better, and
They don't.
Yeah.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, and
The other one, if you read that and you're like, oh man, this is my genre, A Brave New World by Aldous Huxley would be a similar book on that one.
well, Orwell's Animal Farm,
Oh yeah, yeah.
because it's a little bit more. Of course, we're on all equal, but some of us are more equal than others. It's kind
Right,
of like that
right.
language of socialist.
Totalitarian, sort of like
Yeah,
socialism. Yeah.
but we're a nice. I mean, because the Animal Farm kind of comes from this position of this is a benevolent socialism, but then it gets underneath what actually is going on.
Which is how communism always starts. It's benevolent and then it turns totalitarian.
Just in case, just for the listeners, if you're not familiar with Animal Farm, like Animal Farm, what are they talking about?
Yeah.
It's a fictional story where there's a farm, and the animals revolt against their master and take
Mhm.
over the farm and try to establish a society based on fairness and
Mhm.
equality, and because the farmer is a tyrant, right?
Mhm.
That's what they want to get rid of, and it really just goes back to tyranny.
Yep. That's
It,
like
it,
what's the one with the little boys on the island that they have the conch shell? Do you remember? Oh gosh, I
Oh,
read it like 2 years ago.
I know what you're talking about.
Oh, hold on. I gotta Google that. Keep talking, Robbie.
The
Oh, okay. Well, while you're looking for that, I wanted to mention one other book in the same line as things I was talking about before about how the Bible affected culture, and that's a book called Dominion by Tom
Ooh.
Holland.
Yes.
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 Tom Holland, if you're not familiar with him, he is not a Christian.
Yeah.
He actually has a great, in my opinion, great podcast called The Rest Is History
Mhm.
that I listen to pretty religiously. But he wrote a book called Dominion, and he basically starts out by saying, I am not a Christian. I don't really believe that Christianity is true, but I am so glad that some people did.
Mhm.
Because if I'm being honest, all of the things that I love about he's British. He's like everything that I love about my society that I would not want to go without. They all came from
They're
Christianity.
based on that. That goes back to your theme though from the book that made the world or
Yep.
made your world, right? Because it's the same thing.
Yep. What I found interesting about that is that he's not a Christian, and he's
Yeah.
just someone taking an objective, fair look at history and just being honest about where that takes him.
Yeah. By the way, the book I was talking about was Lord of the Flies.
That's it.
Yeah, that's a lot like that too. Okay. All right. So let's switch to another category here. And this is books that made us rethink history. And so Austin, I know what you've been reading and I'm wondering if we have some of the same ones. So, do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
You can go first.
All right. So, the first one is Defenders of the West by Raymond Ibrahim. And so, for me, this book shattered what I consider to be a false moral framework about the Crusades. And so, I had been taught in school and absorbed a caricature of the Crusades and Christian resistance and I thought that it was, they were uniquely barbaric and maybe irrational and certainly indefensible. And I remember I was helping a missionary who worked for Campus Crusades for Christ, and they changed their name to Cru because they didn't want to be associated with Crusades. And I remember thinking, oh, these Crusades must be so bad. And then I read this book, and it shattered everything I thought I knew about the Crusades and how ultimately how shame is used as a weapon against Christian memory.
Are we doing a podcast about the Crusades eventually?
At some point, we
Do I
do want to
remember
do that.
that seeing that on our schedule? Okay.
Yeah. So, Austin, is that one that was on your list? I didn't mean to steal it if it was.
No,
Okay.
I haven't started that. That's on my list to read. I just read his other book, The Sword and
Cemetery.
Scimitar.
Yeah. Okay.
And same thing, like this notion that extremist Muslims are the bad people. Historically, they have been peaceful.
Mm-hmm.
Sword and Scimitar basically goes through the history of jihad,
Mm-hmm.
which starts in 400 BC.
Yeah.
And so you think about this. So we talked about this a couple podcasts ago. The Council of Nicene happened in 325. At that time, Egypt was Christian. fully Christianized or becoming fully Christianized. You had Jerusalem was ran by Christians by the 400s.
Mhm.
All these places, the gospel had spread and Christianity. And then you have Muhammad and his crew just come shed blood. I mean,
Yeah, and this was AD, not BC, by the way.
AD, you're right,
Yeah,
after
yeah,
that.
yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
know why I said BC.
That's okay.
But
Yep.
the point, like you're reading through this history, same thing. I was always taught the Crusaders were bad people, but the Crusades were in
Defensive
my
measure.
it was, and it was a biblical response to defend the weak. And
Mhm.
I mean, because they were like, you read the history accounts, and of course, Sword and Scimitar, he does an excellent job referencing every single historic reference.
Yeah. Yep.
It's
He's a historian. Yeah.
it's awesome. And they were literally like, they would take a town, bring nuns to the center of town, and just openly rape them. The whole concept of stealing blonde-haired, blue-eyed girls, like
Mhm.
they were the first to enslave Africa. They, according to the historical records, an innumerable number of slaves pulled out, and they did that by like 700. So, I mean, they were it really reshaped the way I view history, particularly concerning crusades, so much so that I'm starting defending the West tonight.
Nice. Yeah, yeah.
That's a commitment.
Yeah, it's a commitment.
Okay.
So along that same lines, though, real quick, there's one that I'm still in the middle of right now, but I'm in the middle of it because every time I read it, I have to put the book down because it ticks me off, number one, and number two, it also just makes me emotional. It's called Ravished Armenia, and it was written by a girl who lived through like the Armenian genocide from the Muslims, and it reminds me of that book though, of the gruesomeness that went into a lot of the Muslim like taking over different lands and stuff like that. And so we never hear about that, because it's shameful as a Christian to be proud of your ancestors at all. And so we're not allowed to actually hear that history. And so that's why this one really just changed my thought, though, the Defenders of the West. So anyway, Robbie, you got one in this category, or
Yeah, well, I love history, so I've got more than one
yeah,
in
all of
this
the rest of
category.
yours are in
Yeah,
this
all the
category.
rest of mine are. That is very close to being true. So I think first of all, I wouldn't even say this is like the greatest book in the world. It just because of when I read it, but it's called Getting to Know the Church Fathers: An Evangelical Introduction, by a guy named Brian Litfin. And the basic thing, the church fathers, if you don't know who that is, it's the generation after the apostles. And the reason it made a pretty big impact on me is because I kind of like grew up like saying, okay, you have the apostles, and then pretty much everything was bad until the Reformation.
Same.
And
Yeah.
and so the fact that I had this book by an evangelical Christian, and even says an evangelical introduction, and I was introduced to people that I should have heard of: Ignatius, Justin Martyr,
Hmm.
Tertullian, even people I might like a little bit less, like Origen.
Hmm.
Uh, I didn't know who any of these people were, and so to be introduced to them and realize that there were other Christians that I did not know about, and that, along with another book called Church History in Plain
Hmm.
Language by Bruce Shelley.
Hmm.
Those two were about church history, and they were just about this large section of church history that I had never heard of before. And I realized why people don't talk about it, and that is because it's uncomfortable.
Hmm.
Because you're going to find out that there are people that were Christians who said a lot of great things, who also said a lot of weird stuff and
Yep.
stuff we would disagree with.
Yep.
And it really kind of like shook my world of how I viewed Christian history, because I had to realize there were things that I just had to acknowledge, that there could be people who disagreed with me on certain things, and I was just going to have to be okay with that because they were great Christians.
Yeah.
Despite that. And that kind of goes along with the Crusades too, because I have I think a little bit more mixed feelings about the Crusades than you guys do, and we can talk.
We'll get you there, Robbie. Don't you worry.
We'll argue about that
Yeah.
on another time. Well, being such a fan of the Crusades, I'm a little afraid when you say you're going to get me. But
well, you just haven't read the books yet. That's the problem.
But yeah, just that got me to just view church history and therefore I think church present a lot
Yes.
different.
We have this chronological snobbery that, we look back on the past and it's like, oh, we know so much more. And in reality, it's exactly the opposite. So I want you to throw out the rest of your years, but since you just mentioned that, I'm going to mention my other one in this category because it fits that narrative exactly. And it was The White Horse King was the name of the book by Ben Merkle.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, it's a great book. So it's on King Alfred. And before reading this book, sort of like you were just talking about, Robbie, I had unconsciously assumed that every Christian prior to the Reformation, because they were Catholic, was not as good, let's say, right? And like their theological continuity and, things like that were just off. And so it gave me, reading that book, it gave me a gratitude for our Christian forebears. And in fact, this book caused me to use King Alfred in Sandstorm Creed, which is a book that I just wrote. So one of the books that I just wrote literally has Alfred's one of the things that you learn about Alfred is, well, I'm not going to go into it, but in that book, I learned something about him and the history of that time period that made me use it in one of my other books. And so that was the same thing. I had like this chronological snobbery that I looked down upon anybody pre-Reformation.
Yeah, you put me onto that book last year,
Yeah.
and I ended up audiobooking that on my drive to Ohio, and I didn't even think about that. That's definitely a good read.
It's always a good thing when you read so many books that you forget the ones that were super impactful.
I'm going to throw out one in this category that you guys might not know about: "Slaying Leviathan," written
Yes.
by Glenn Sunshine.
Yeah.
It kind of fits into this category because he uses history as his foundation, but he uses history, makes an argument for a biblical foundation for what government should be, what it looks like when you have an omnipotent state and the state thinks it's God, when people treat the state as an idol, when we go too far, and it goes back to what our Christian response should be and how Christians should rebel against totalitarian. We should rebel against a state that's
Tyranny.
anti-God.
Yeah.
It gives a biblical foundation for Christian rebellion.
Mhm.
And excellent
Yeah.
read.
That is a good
But
one.
it definitely changed the way I seen history because I always thought that a lot of Christian rebellion through history was like, well, God used the Americans rebelling against the British just because they shouldn't have rebelled. And after I look at the biblical response and the actual historical narrative, I've come to realize it was their biblical duty to rebel. And
Mhm.
praise God they did.
Amen.
Yeah.
What about you, Robbie? I feel like you got like 3 more there.
Okay, well,
Because we're moving the next one, just to give you a heads up, so that way you know whether you want to talk about these here or not. The next one we're moving to is books that changed how we see ourselves as men. So if you got any more
yeah,
history ones, now's the time.
yeah, let me go history here.
Cool.
Since we're talking about history, can we get a little political
Sure.
if we're talking about history? Because so I grew up in a very Republican household,
Mhm.
and like I know like Rush Limbaugh very well,
And
just because
you're better off for it,
yeah, because
Robbie.
I've heard it so many times. And when I was a kid growing up in the '90s, I knew I hated Bill Clinton. I didn't know why, but I just heard so many bad things about him in my household. So we were a very Republican family, and because of that, Ronald Reagan was the ultimate
Yeah.
hero, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I started to realize that I was interested in history, I picked up a book called The Age of Reagan.
Mm.
And I ordered it from Amazon, and I didn't realize actually what I was buying, and I'm glad because it actually turned out to be better than what I thought it was gonna be, because I thought it was gonna be about Reagan's presidency,
Mhm.
and what I didn't realize is the book actually ends with Reagan becoming president, and the book is actually it actually covers American history from 1964, that would be Lyndon Johnson,
Mhm.
up until Reagan gets elected. And it goes through that history of people much more liberal than Reagan and explaining how could someone as conservative as Reagan get elected. And it really, I mean, I had a general idea of what was happening in those years in the 60s and 70s,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't really know.
Yeah.
And it really opened my eyes up to a lot of things, and I'm like, oh, so that's why things are like that today, or
Yeah.
oh, that person did that, and so and then there's a second Age of Reagan book that's actually about his time as president, and it just explained a lot of the world, of aspects of the country to me that I didn't understand before, and it not exposed me to the good things about Reagan, but it also made me realize that wait, my heroes are also not always
Perfect.
perfect.
Yep. Yep.
Reagan was one of the first to liberalize abortion laws when he was governor.
No
at
fault
will
divorce.
marriage. Yeah. Yeah.
No
Exactly.
fault
At will marriage.
divorce. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so when he was governor of California, just to be clear.
Mhm.
And so it really exposed me to a lot of that, and because of that, I started on a journey of trying to read various presidents, especially from my lifetime, like
Like their
biographies
biography.
or
Mhm.
autobiographies. And so I not long after that picked up, just because of the timing, George W. Bush's memoirs
Mhm.
came out right around that same time. And having grown up and kind of become more politically aware during the Bush years, and of course
That was the first one you and I voted in, wasn't it?
his reelection, his
Yeah,
when he was trying to get
2004.
reelected.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
2004.
yeah,
Yep.
that's the
Yep.
first one I voted
Same
in.
here.
Yeah,
Yep.
and he was such a very controversial president. And just hearing him explain his own controversial decisions, and since then, I've heard so many people make claims about him, and I'm like, "Have you heard?" And I realize he could be lying. People in autobiographies are always trying to make themselves look good, so
Yeah.
I'm not ignorant of or naive of that. But it's like, have you heard his actual explanation for why he went into Iraq?
Yeah.
That type of thing. Because maybe if you're gonna support it or criticize it or whatever, maybe you should actually hear his own words and then
Yeah. Yeah.
judge after that.
I've heard
Uh,
Robbie make the same claim about Bernie Sanders.
Well, I'm not going to Bernie Sanders, but my last book I am going to
Bill Clinton.
I knew it.
is A Promised Land by Barack Obama.
Oh my
word.
gosh.
No,
Literally can't even believe
but
that's
here's the
on
thing.
this
I just
podcast.
threw up a little bit.
Yeah.
No, this book is 700 and about 700 pages, and it ends at his first term. So he's supposed to have a sequel to finish it. But here's the thing that this taught me. Could I read a whole book by a politician whose worldview I disagreed with? And could I handle hearing them out? And could I allow that to challenge me? And the thing about reading a book like this is it humanizes politicians that you don't like.
Hmm.
And for instance, at one point in the book, I remember him dealing with a certain amount of guilt on the amount of time that being president kept him away from his daughters.
Hmm.
And I remember thinking that's, I think, what anybody would feel if they had a really time-consuming job.
Mhm.
Oh, he's not like the politicians we don't necessarily like they're people like us, And so that I think that so all of those things I think just made me think about history and the nation and the leaders of our nation really in ways I hadn't thought of before.
I've got one more in this category, and I know we've been in this category a long time because of Brother Robbie. But one I just finished just 2 weeks ago, and I should have put it on my list because it's Worldly Saints is the name of the book. Leland Ryland and J.I. Packer. And what they do is they go through the history of the Puritans.
Hmm.
And the word puritanical and the Puritans, I remember thinking the Puritans were like these tight-laced, scrubby people. And what I love about this book is where they are tight-laced and extremely moralistic, the book is honest about it. But it also showed me another side to the Puritans, that they were very much just Christians trying to be faithful, and that they were a fun-loving group. So I could recommend that book to anybody who wants to learn more about the Puritans. It is well done.
It is good. I like that one. Yeah. All right. So let's move on from there. Let's go to books that changed how we see ourselves as men. So, this is like responsibility, courage, bearing the weight of being a man. The first one I've got is Masculine Christianity by Zachary Garris. Either you read that one?
No.
Mm.
You ever heard of it?
No,
No.
I have not.
Okay. All right. So, Robbie, this is the one you need to read if you want to read about patriarchy. This
Okay.
is the one I was talking about. I said, I've got a book I can give you. This one, he shows that biblical masculinity is a good, positive force, and it doesn't have to be this aggressive, force that we hear. It's directed towards bearing responsibility and leading and protecting. And so it's sobering because I don't always live up to that, right? And it talks about how when men abdicate their responsibilities, others have to absorb the cost. And it's usually women and children. And so when you read this book, you'll see all the ways you'll go, oh, yeah, that issue is because dads weren't being the dads they needed to be. And so that was a great book. And it made me even more patriarchal in a biblical way than I was before. I've got two more in there too, but I'll let you guys talk first.
One
Or I
second.
can just keep going. I can keep going. All right, so two more. I've got now this next one, I do not recommend. Okay. I read this when I was probably 25, maybe somewhere around there. And it's The Way of Men by Jack Donovan. And he is openly anti-Christian. Like his worldview is nothing like mine. But what he had was a really sharp pulse on like honor and male bonding and why we want to be strong and why the modern man feels disconnected. And so it taught me that being a man is good and that like discernment doesn't mean pretending to be something that you're not. So it was a really good book in like a crucial point in my life when I was, you think of the age of 25 and a dude, and it's like finally things start like clicking, and around that same time, I also read this other book, which is Wild at Heart by John Eldredge. Either one of you ever read that one?
No.
Oh man.
Yeah,
Okay.
I actually have Wild at Heart in my Audible account, but
Uh-huh.
I've never listened to it.
Okay. So that one is a really good one. If The Way of Men sounds interesting, but you want it from a Christian perspective, that's this one. And so, it was just one of those books that was like crucial at a period of my life when it was like, I don't have to apologize for being a man. This is a good thing. And so it's kind of like the precursor to It's Good to Be a Man, which is by, what's that guy's name?
I've read that, but I don't remember the name.
Yeah.
He's right there in Ohio, Austin.
It's Good to Be a Man. That is, oh crap. Who
I'll
wrote
look it
that?
up.
I just opened the book. Michael Foster.
Michael Foster. Yeah. Foster.
Yeah. Michael
So
Foster.
it's similar to that. Like it shows you that, this therapeutic masculinity that the modern age is trying to push on you is not good, and that it is actually good to be a man the way that God frames biblical manhood. And so I didn't agree with every worldview that he had, but overall it was really good.
Michael Foster's Good to Be a Man. I actually read that with my boys,
Mm-hmm.
my two teenage boys, year before last. And
Mhm.
just forewarning to the men, it is a good book to take your young men through. There is a section on sexuality that I think a kid needs to be 16 or older to truly be able to go through it in a mature way.
Right.
But excellent book. Excellent book. This one's kind of a weird one for this category, but the Screw Tape Letters. And for those who have never read the Screw Tape Letters, that's right up there with one of my top 10 books I tell everybody to read. It's C.S. Lewis, and it's a letter between this demon in training, Wormwood, and his master, and how they're trying to trap men. And it's funny because like it makes you realize that Satan loves to get in and tempt us with ordinary means that we don't always see. And we end up falling in these things. It's kind of like, one of the attitudes is, well, he's going to church. That could be a good thing. Maybe he can think he's more spiritual than he is. And, and that,
Or he's busy. Let's use that.
yes, he
Yeah.
thinks he's doing a lot,
Yeah.
but let's,
Yeah.
or even like, oh, he's dieting. Let's make him think that he's not being a glutton by making him boastful in the things he doesn't take in.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things that made me look at my life and be more careful, because I read it I probably read it the first time in my 20s. I've picked this book up probably 5 times
Mm.
because it's a good reminder of how easy it is to fall in sin. And then
Can I just say something about the Screw Tape Letters?
Yeah.
Excellent book. It really makes you think about temptation and your own flaws in different ways.
Mhm.
I actually recently heard on what podcast were they listening to? The White Horse Inn.
Mhm.
If you ever listened to that?
Oh, I love
They,
White Horse Inn.
they were just talking about the C.S. Lewis recently, and they mentioned the Screw Tape Letters. And I guess originally it came out in kind of a series in newspapers, I think is what they were saying. But I think it was in America, they didn't want to print them because they didn't understand that it was like him being clever. He thought, why is this guy trying to teach people how to tempt people? They didn't really get what he was trying to do. But yeah, excellent book. Screw
Yeah,
Tape.
it is good. It is good.
And
There's actually one specifically for women that came out last year by Tilly Delahaye. Canon Press does it. I need to figure out the name of that one. But Brooke read it last year, and it was really good. It was the same type of thing, but specific to women's struggles. And it's called My Dear Hemlock. My Dear Hemlock. And so it's one of the, elder demons writing to one of the other demons about how to tempt the woman. So I thought it was pretty good. But yeah, C.S. Lewis is great.
I'm glad somebody attempted to do a female version of that.
Mm-hmm.
I have one more in this category, and it's written by a man who has been a professional counselor his whole life. It's not really Christian, but it had a massive influence on me personally as a man. So, little background about why. When I was finishing up some of my certifications in counseling, I had to do 3 specializations. And so I did children, I did marriage and family, and I was wanting to do addiction, and my supervisor basically said, "No." It was a Christian school. "I've been praying about it, Austin, and I want you to do anger management."
Mm.
And so he recommended 5 books. Some of them were more clinical. This one was real practical. Why Does He Do That? Written by Lundy Bancroft.
Mm.
It opened my eyes to how angry I actually am, and
Mhm.
how I thought I was under control of it, but I wasn't always as in control as I thought I was.
Right.
And because I can just confessing my sins. I'm one of those people in my 20s. In my 20s, I put my hand through walls, through doors. I would never lay a hand on anybody, but I had an anger issue, and I did not realize how out of control it was. And it really gave me tools that line up with behavioral therapy, which lines up more with the scriptural way of dealing with things. And we got to be careful not to slip into moralism, but there is such a thing as disciplining and
Mhm.
and rising above some of these. And that book, I recommend it to any man who has a problem with anger. Why Does He Do That? By Lundy Bancroft. It
Yeah.
had a massive influence on my life.
That's good. That's good.
I'll just mention one in this category. And this actually, it's kind of interesting that you brought up a counseling book because I thought it was going to be weird to bring up a counseling book for this. And this person is a Christian, but it was a book. This is another one I loaned out to somebody, never got back. But I know, Austin, I know you've read this book before, but by Jay Adams, Nuthaic
Oh,
Counseling.
competent to counsel.
Competent to Counsel. That's what it is. It's about what he calls Nuthaic Counseling. And I don't 100% agree with everything about the book, but what the book really tries to get you to do is when you're counseling people because they're especially thinking about pastors and Christian counselors, is to use the scriptures to counsel people and to base everything you can on a passage of scripture and what it says.
Mm-hmm.
And reading that in Bible college really shaped not just how I counseled other people, but how I talked to myself. And it really just kind of trained me to kind of look for like my behavior and my thought patterns and said, is this biblical? And having a book to really put my mind in that area and asking those type of questions and searching the scriptures and learning how to apply the scriptures, I think was very helpful for shaping me in a positive way as a man.
Well, and if and this was not on my list, but when I was studying counseling, this effective biblical counseling written by Larry Crabb,
Mm.
I think every pastor, every teacher needs to pick up this book. Every parent, it's just extremely practical. He draws from Jay Adams. He goes a little bit further than Jay Adams. He's not solely Nuthaic, but Larry Crabb is solidly theologically
What was the
grounded.
name of the book again?
Effective Biblical Counseling by Larry Crabb.
That's good.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Let's see. 3 more categories. I know we're already running along, but this is gonna be a fun one. So, 5th category: books that made us feel the weight of life. So, my first one is The Warrior Ethos by Stephen Pressfield, and this one could have gone in the previous category too, and maybe it actually should have gone there. But have either one of you read that one? The
No.
Warrior Ethos by Stephen Pressfield. Okay, so it's not a Christian book per se, but it is a book about the inner war that we all sort of struggle with, and the resistance, and about developing courage and self mastery and virtue. And so it was really instrumental in my writing of Vivere Militari Est. And so it teaches you about strengthening resolve and faithfulness. And so that was good. And then the second one that I'm going to say in this category so far is East of Eden by John Steinbeck. Either one of you read that?
No.
No.
Oh man, you guys got to read that one. I have every fiction book that I've written, I've thrown that book in there somehow. It's total fiction. It's like 500 pages. It's a pretty dense one, but it doesn't teach any doctrine or anything like that. But it teaches about sin. It teaches about inheritance and about choices that we make. It's the story of these 2 brothers, and it's supposed to be sort of a play on Cain and Abel. And if you have brothers, which Austin, I know you do, I do as well, it's a good one. It's a good book for fathers because you learn about like how you parent and how that can affect your child. And because it's not a nonfiction book, you get into it and you're reading it and you're feeling without like the language of a theology book or anything like that. Great book. Great book.
And see, Robbie's an only child, and that's the reason why he's so objectional when we talk. That's what it is.
I
And
don't
then
agree with that.
have you ever heard anybody ever say Timshel or Thou mayest?
No, I've never heard
Okay.
that.
All right. Well, you got to get the book then. Listen to it on audiobook if you need to.
Yeah, I tell you, audiobook, I used to just be of the snobbery that if you're not reading, you're not reading.
Mm-hmm.
But
Right.
I have
Audiobooks are great.
I've discovered that I can supplement much more reading into my schedule when I mix audiobooks in with my regular reading.
For sure.
Yep.
Feeling the Weight of Life, Robbie actually let me borrow this book from him, and it's Walking with God Through Pain and Suffering by Tim Keller.
Mm.
That book gave me an insight to, as a pastor, with people dealing with pain and suffering. I that book by Tim Keller, and then you gave me another one by Tim Keller. I read it the same time, Robbie, where he talks about the wayward son.
Oh, the Prodigal Son. I know
Prodigal
what you're
Son.
talking about. I've read that one too.
But both of those, Tim Keller, and that's the thing is a lot of people will dismiss or throw away preachers because they don't agree. Tim Keller is by far one of the best writers as far as reading. There's nothing you can pick up by Tim Keller that will not be fun and easy to read.
It's called
But
Prodigal God. by the way.
Prodigal God,
Mhm.
that's another one. Both of those on a more serious note, if I'm thinking about this category, and on a early in life note, the Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan.
Oh yeah, good.
That walking through darkness, pain and suffering, I I I highly recommend that. And when I first read it, I read it and I said, "I really wish I had had this a year ago."
Mm.
And the reason was I'd had probably when I read it, I I had gone through the probably the most difficult year of my life just a year before that I read it. And it was like it's kind of weird is when you're a pastor and working in ministry, you counsel people who are going through difficult situations, and it's really hard. You find that at least I found it's very hard. It's much harder to counsel yourself
Mm.
because you know what you should be telling yourself because what it's what you would tell other people. But I wish I had had that book. It's something I would recommend you read before you go through the pain and suffering. Not while you're
So
going through it.
if
Not
you
yeah.
know when pain and suffering is coming, just read it before
Yeah, well, yeah.
that.
Well, in other words, now. Don't wait
Yeah,
till you're in it.
right.
Don't wait till you've already had to try to figure it out, like read stuff like that, beforehand. So that I would definitely recommend that.
Okay. I got two more in this category if I can throw those out there.
Go ahead.
Okay. Number one, or number three, I guess, really, is Shop Class's Soulcraft by Matthew Crawford. Either one of you read that one?
No. You like Crawford, don't you?
This is the first one I've said from him.
Oh, I thought you mentioned another one.
Matthew
Oh.
Crawford. This is the only one. I think he passed away, actually, if I remember correctly. But either way, this was a book about like work ethic and embodying work. And so it's really one of those deals where like work can teach competence and faithfulness and humility. And it just reinforced that responsibility is learned by doing actual things in the real world and then being corrected by failures and setbacks and things like that. So that was a great one. And then the last one that I'll throw out in this category is another fiction book called Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurdy. Neither one of you read that either, have you?
Is that
No.
like the classic Lonesome
It
Dove?
is. Yeah. Lonesome Dove, the classic.
Did they make is it a Western?
It is a Western. It was originally a book. I think they'd made a movie or a show.
Yeah, I remember my dad
after.
watching the movie,
Yeah,
I believe.
it's an awesome book. It's an awesome book for men. It's about aging. It's about endurance, remaining faithful. So these are cowboys who were out west, and they had fought in the wars with the Mexicans and everything like that. And so, but really, it is a book about finishing well. You don't get that until way, way, way later in the book. And it's a 1,000-page book as well. So it's one of those that's just like, you're just going to have to commit to it. But it sort of shaped my understanding of masculinity in a way that a fiction book can. And so it kind of left me admiring men who don't quit, even when no one is watching, even when things are hard. They just keep putting one foot in front of the other and do the work even when there's no seeming reward for it.
Seems like this is your favorite category.
It was, sorry.
Yeah.
The next one's pretty bad too. I've got 7 books in the next one.
Well, it's funny because when you were talking in this category, a book that I wish affected me more as a man, that every time I've read it or even see it on my shelf, I go, oh, I need to do that, is Productivity by Doug Wilson.
It's such a short book too.
It
He's got it
is.
on audiobook.
It's one of those things. It's like I could waste way less time.
So Austin, you were asking earlier during the elders meeting, you were talking about like, how do you get it? You must spend as much time doing this or whatever. And that's exactly what that book's about. Like just using, even if you got 10 minutes, using that 10 minutes wisely. You got to pick that book up, dude.
Oh no, I've read it. I've read it.
Oh, okay. I thought you said you hadn't.
He
read
just
it.
can't do it.
I just
Oh.
can't do it. Every time I
okay.
read that book, it's kind of like, okay, I'm doing this.
Oh, I
And
see. I see.
it lasts a week or two, and then I kind of fall and I'm always working, but I'm a
Yeah.
one thing at a time person.
Right.
And
Okay.
productivity is more about being able to switch tasks in order to get more done.
Yes.
and
Yes,
I have a
yes.
hard time with that. So
I got you. Okay.
yeah,
I feel you. Yeah.
yeah,
It's the ADHD is what it is, right?
it is. It's that monkey on my back, man.
That's right. That's right. All right. So next category, and this is probably my second favorite category, or the one I had. Actually, I had more books in this category than any other one. Books that formed the mind. And so, I feel like you guys will probably have a lot in here too, specifically because you're both educators as well. So I'll let you start and then I'll go.
So
Um,
go ahead, Robbie.
yeah, so I'm gonna go off something that Austin brought up earlier, and that was Tim Keller books and C.S. Lewis books. I think are really
Pretty much everything they wrote.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
Tim Keller. Like I didn't even know. Like this is my pre John MacArthur, where I didn't know Reform people. I had someone that I actually knew in high school comment on my one of my Facebook posts, and I forget even what I'd said, but they're like, "Have you ever read The Reason for God by Tim Keller?"
Oh, that's
And
a
I was
good
like
one.
"No, I don't know who that is or what that is." And I just ignored her. And then years later, when they started putting the memories things up where you could kind of see past stuff, I noticed that she'd said that, and I was like, maybe I should look into that. And so I grad, but yeah, so that exposed me to his writings, and a lot of his writings really got me to think about things in different ways. And he
That's
get,
his best book in my mind.
yeah, I think it definitely could
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
He's written a number of very good books that have really taught me to think, and I think he's kind of in the spiritual line of C.S. Lewis, where
Mhm.
we've already mentioned these, but Mere Christianity, the Screw Tape Letters, The Great Divorce,
Mhm.
which is a really interesting book. I'm not
Abolition
sure.
of Man. Abolition
The
of Man is a good one.
Abolition of Man is a great book about education
Mhm.
that'll get you to think. And have you guys ever read C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy?
I haven't. I've got it. I've got all of them, but I haven't read it. I haven't
Yeah,
started
I
on it.
have it too, and I've
They
never read it.
really they're science fiction books, and if you think about it, they're science fiction books before we went to the moon.
Yep. Yep.
And so he's
Crazy.
writing about space travel and such before we'd done any of that
Yep.
stuff. But and when I heard about this, I couldn't believe it, because I thought of C.S. Lewis as an apologist.
Mhm.
I did think of him as a Christian, like a fiction writer, but I thought like Chronicles of Narnia. And when I thought C.S. Lewis, I didn't think like space movies or space books. That's
Uh-huh.
weird to me.
Uh-huh.
But they really do get you to think,
Yeah.
about, I can't even really explain it too much, but basically in the first book, m the main character, Ransom, he gets taken on a spaceship built by these other guys, and he gets taken to, I think it's Mars. They don't call it Mars. I think it's called Paralandria or something like that.
Pearlandria. Mhm.
Yeah, and so you meet aliens, but it really gets you to think, because they're in a world that hasn't been corrupted by sin, is kind of the idea. And so it really makes you
Huh.
think about not just aliens but humanity when you're
Mhm.
when you're reading it. And so I really recommend those two authors to really affect your mind.
So if you're gonna read some of C.S. Lewis though, and you want to branch out a little bit, have you read Till We Have Faces?
I have not actually.
Oh my gosh, great book. He said it's his best book. He loved writing that one, and he said it's his best one, and it's called Till We Have Faces: A Myth Retold, and it's the myth of Cupid and Psyche, and he tells it in and teaches sort of like it's a fiction book, but he weaves in the morality of a Christian, and he shows the the downside of not having a Christian worldview in that book, and I thought that was a really good one. In fact, Canon Press just did a thing on it a little while back where they kind of broke it down and stuff, and I thought they did a pretty good job on that. But anyway, go ahead, Austin. Sorry, man.
So I have one that's kind of off the island. It's a book called Unlimited Memory.
Ooh.
So it's written by a man by the name of Grandmaster Kevin Horsley. And the neat thing about this book is the first two chapters, he kind of tells a story that he was a C student in high school who felt like he couldn't read, who constantly would say he's bad at school, he's bad at education. And then when he was a young adult in his late 20s, he walks into a bookstore and he sees 2 books on the shelf. One book is How to Speed Read and Remember What You Read, and another book was about memory, how to remember things or whatever. He tells the name of the books that he read in the book. So he thinks to himself, he goes, "You know what? I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna read this book on speed reading so that I can read the other books quicker." And he quickly realized that that's not how the mind works. And then what he did get from it was memory tricks, and how you look at your ability to memorize things has an effect on your ability to actually memorize things. And so he held several world records to tie to the most places, deck
Wow.
memory cards. So there's a memory challenge that's done where they take something like thousands of cards, player cards, and you have to memorize the order. He has the world record for the most cards remembered in order. Took him
Wow.
something like 2 hours to just say them off as quick as he could. But just this brilliant mind who was horrible in school, and, like, if you would interview his elementary teachers, they'd be like, "Yeah, this kid ain't college bound."
Mhm.
But as soon
Awesome.
as Huh?
Am I correct that you had your daughter read that book?
I've made my daughter read this, I've made Colin read it, I'm getting ready to make Carson
Because
read it.
because when she was in my classes, I think she used a lot of
Techniques.
the mind trick, yeah, the mind, I almost said mind tricks, but the mind techniques in there, and I from what I could tell, it seemed to really help her a lot.
Oh, yeah, well, we had one young man in our school who was really struggling to pass test, and I actually taught a class, for a half credit utilizing this book, and it was test memory skills, basic those type of things. I forget what we named it, critical thinking, memory skills, or something like that. And I had one young man who, after he took the class, he came to me like a year later. He ended up going to public school because he wanted to go to a certain trade school. He came to me a year later. He's like, "I got to tell you, when I stopped telling myself that it's hard, and I stopped telling myself that I can't remember this and realized that I can remember this, and then I started using stuff to help me to memorize it." He goes, "I would not have gotten through school and done as well if had I not gone through that class." And up to that point, he was really struggling. And so it's a book I highly recommend, especially if you're a homeschool mom out there. Get this book into your kids' hands. It's one that I put in my kids' hands. It's just an excellent book about forming the mind and training the mind to memorize things.
Say the name of it again.
Unlimited Memory by Grandmaster Kevin Horsley.
And what age would you recommend that you hand that off to your kids?
I would say it's written at a ninth grade level.
Okay, so could you walk them through it earlier if you read it?
You could, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's not a very big book.
Is this the one that you did something on with, like, a carrot, and you were, like you showed, like, the different
Oh, how to
vegetables?
memorize, yeah, the
Yeah.
7 highly effective. Yes.
Okay.
I've done that a few times 'cause I'll use the memory lattices. I
Yeah.
use a lot of these things I learned in this book, and honestly, I
Because you used
wish.
to think that you were not very good at school too, right? Like, you
Oh,
struggled
I
early.
was horrible all the way through elementary and junior high. I was decent in high school. It wasn't until I got into my 20s that I realized I can read and retain
Yeah.
and grow.
Yeah.
Um, I wish I would have discovered how much I love learning earlier in life.
Yeah. Yeah, don't we all? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna start touching on some of mine. I won't go into every single one on detail because I do have 7, but the most influential book I've ever read on education and formation of the mind is a book called Climbing Parnassus by Tracy Lee Simmons, and it's all about classic learning. And so wisdom, beauty, the transcendentals, all that. I mean, it's about how, like, basically, I guess what I'm saying is it shaped how I think about learning and reading and then raising children. Like, it's the book that made me go, okay, like, I need to take this very seriously. In the same vein, the second one there is Battle for the American Mind by Pete Hegseth and David Goodwin. That one is a fairly new one that came out, what, like 3 or 4
Last
years
year.
ago, probably.
Was
No,
it? I thought it was.
it's been a couple years ago because he's been in office for a year already. But it's the one that introduced me to the Western Christian paideia, I didn't even know what the word paideia meant before. And it shows how like schools don't just transmit information, they shape loyalties and values and identity. And so it talked about how education is never neutral. And then a third one here is Atomic Habits by James Clear. Either one of you heard that one?
I have heard that one. I haven't read
Okay.
it.
So, atomic, he breaks it down like atomic is the smallest particle of anything. And he's talking about how basically big convictions will collapse without small structures that are put in place. So, like earlier, I was talking to you guys about habit tracker, and like that comes straight from Atomic Habits, like developing like small daily habits. Like let's say you never floss, right? And you really want to floss, and so he gives you like small habits to put in place to start doing big things, and that was really good. And then I got three more, and then I'll shut up. Recovering the Lost Tools of Learning by Douglas Wilson.
That I was going to mention that after you were
Okay.
done.
Okay.
Yep.
And then two more. The Core by Lee Bortons. She's the one that started Classical Conversations. And she talks a lot about Dorothy Sayers and about Doug Wilson and all that. And then the third one here is The Well-Educated Mind by Susan Weiss Bauer. And so all three of those books reinforce the other ones that I talked about. But basically, formation has to come before information. And that's where the, grammar, logic, and rhetoric stages and all that are taught. And so it was just really about mental discipline and about how we learn and things like that. So
Yeah, if you want an introductory to all the things he just talked about, I would say Recovering the Lost Tool of Learning is the introductory book to that subject.
Yeah, that's probably true. Yep.
Because it will deal with the background, the history, some of the facts that we're missing, how we used to have a much better, well-rounded, educated basis than we do now.
Although here's what I'll say. If you can only read one, like if your kids are in public school right now and you're like, okay, this sounds interesting. If you can only read one of those, I'd go for Battle for the American Mind by Pete Hegseth and David Goodwin. If you're already feeling strongly about these things, go to Climbing Parnassus or Recovering the Lost Tools of Learning.
That's good.
Okay. So last category. You guys ready for the last one? Books that change how we actually live day to day.
The
Robbie,
Bible.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. I feel like I should have prefaced from the very beginning that the Bible doesn't count here because it should guide everything we do all the time.
All I heard was you just said the Bible doesn't count.
If you
That's what I
clipped
heard.
it,
Shocked.
if you clipped it
heard.
right there, that is what it would say.
Which we will.
You are like 1984 is what you are, Robbie. All right. You guys want to start?
So Ian Bounds, The Pastor in Prayer. That was it was one of those books you go, okay, why should a pastor pray? Well, I can't get anything done. I read it last year, and it was one of those ones that made me think we got to add more prayer in the church. I need to spend more time in prayer. Ian Bounds, and it's kind of, it bounces off. So John Calvin has a work called The Chief Exercise of Faith, and that's all about the prayer life. I think prayer is one of those things that we severely underestimate because we overestimate ourselves. And so that would be my first entry on that.
Okay. It was called The Pastor in Prayer.
The Pastor in Prayer by Ian Bounds.
Okay. I hadn't read that one. I'll check it out. What about you, Robbie? How
I
you
have
did,
one-
how you live day to day.
Yeah, I have one here, and it's actually a book by Vodi Bakum.
Mm-hmm.
Before I even knew who he was, I found a discount on a Kindle book,
Mhm.
and it sounded really interesting. And so I picked it up, and so I read this, and then I heard somebody recommend another book by him years later, and I was like, that name sounds really familiar to me, and that's because I had a book on my Kindle, but it's called Family Driven Faith.
Uh-huh.
And it really just kind of reinforced the idea, of how you need to, as a husband and a father in particular, how to lead your household and be responsible for how your children are raised and such thing. It just gave me a lot of things to think about as a husband at the time, and then at the time I had one child who was 2 at the oldest, and so it really had me like think about like what did I want to do in the future,
Hmm.
you know? And so I thought that was really helpful for me. And that did shape what eventually became my kind of my everyday life, I think.
Yeah. 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 He's got another one that was called Family Shepherds, I think, that plays on that same concept. But okay. So I've got two for this category. That's it. Number one is As a Man Thinketh by a guy named James Allen. And I don't agree with everything that this guy wrote. I don't know that he was a Christian. In fact, I'm pretty sure he wasn't. And he's very optimistic about, you know, what we can do. And he sort of downplays sin and stuff like that. But it really forced me to confront what we allow into our minds. And so his whole premise is like what you allow into your mind is what you're being fed, what you're being taught, and what you believe about yourself. And so it sort of made me discipline my interior life a little bit there. And the other one is maybe one of the most influential books that I've ever read as a leader, as a person. And it's a book called Quiet by Susan Cain. You guys ever heard of that one?
No.
Okay. It's a whole book about how introverts can be leaders. And she's talking about how in the modern world, almost all the leaders are extroverts because they're the ones that are the loudest. They're the ones that are out front. They're the ones that people think of when they think of leaders. And she talked about how, in fact, actually, people that are introverted are usually better leaders in the sense that they have the ability to think, and instead of just talking, they're watching and they're taking things in, and they can process really good, and they can be really good leaders too. They're just different types of leaders. And she talked about how like she was one of the first ones that made me realize that like, okay, the difference between an extrovert and an introvert is like where you get your energy. Do you get your energy from being around people, or do you get your energy by closing in and going to Dunkin' Donuts and reading, Robbie? and and so it made me realize, because I was a leader in my job, but I never felt like I was going to be as good as a lot of the other people who were just more outgoing and extroverted. But I always felt like I'm like, they don't actually know what they're doing though. Like I look at them and I can see right through what they're saying, and they don't believe anything that they're saying. They don't live that, but because they can get up there and say it really good, they lead and people follow. And so what I learned from that book is how you can actually still lead without being that person that has to always be heard. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it's a good book if you're not an extrovert. If you're an extrovert, you'll be like, ah.
Yeah, it's funny. So many people think extrovert means loud.
Yeah.
And I would say more extroverts are loud than introverts, but there's a
Right.
lot of loud introverts too.
Yes,
They
for
just
sure.
they don't want to
And they're
stay
usually
loud
on
very
keyboards
long.
for sure.
Yeah. They don't want to stay loud very long because they got to go recharge.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I
It
have
was a
I
good book.
have an honorable mention in this category,
Okay.
and I don't think it's in print anymore, but it's a book written by Mark Driscoll back in the day,
Yeah.
and it was Radical Reformation.
Okay. I don't know that one.
It just kind of laid out the church, the drive of the church, tribes and the different denominations, what we should do, how we should work together, biblical foundation for that. It had a big effect on my day to day as a minister early in my Reformation.
What was the name of it again?
A Radical Reformation by Mark Driscoll. I don't think it's in print anymore.
Huh. Okay.
So,
Okay. I
Robert,
think, yeah, I
Robert,
was going to say,
does Robert have any?
Yeah, I already gave one.
You did?
Yep.
Okay.
we forgot it already. It's okay. We can replay.
Any
This,
honorable mentions?
Bob, I think he's talking to you.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I've got
You're kind of worn out.
He's
we've
like,
been
I just want to go home.
Yeah. I'm going to put one more on the list, and I don't know where it would fall on the list. The Distinctive of Baptist Covenant Theology, written by Pascal Denal.
Pascal. Yep.
I think that's a book. If you're a young theologian and you're wanting to wrap your head around historic positions of Baptist theology, that's the starting place.
Here's the funny thing about that one. I read that once, and I walked away and was like, I still don't know what makes
But
me.
Pascal Donald does
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's
So
the
I need
thing
to read that
about
one
the
again.
book is it lays down all these historic Baptist positions,
Yep.
but we're not a denomination. So there's these slight variations through all the Baptist forefathers, but at least he lays it out there, you know?
So
Yeah.
one book that well, actually, I can't tell you if I recommend it yet because I haven't finished it. It's actually the book I'm reading right now,
Mhm.
but I'm about 75 pages through, and I know you guys have read this book. But What is a Reformed Baptist
Yes.
by
Yes.
Tom Hicks?
Uh-huh.
In fact, I think I got this because you recommended
I
it.
recommend it. It's awesome, isn't it?
Yeah, it
Well, so
is,
far.
and it's a very informative read, but it's an easy read. Like it doesn't drag on. So it's a very, very, very well written. So if you are a Baptist, Reformed Baptist, and you want to kind of clarify exactly what that is, or maybe you don't know what kind of Baptist you are, or you want to know what that is, that seems like it seems like it's shaping up to be a very,
So
very interesting book.
Austin has not read it yet. I've been talking to him about it.
Well,
Been telling him he needs to read
I
it.
listen to you.
Yes, thank you.
Beowulf.
Thank you, Robbie. Yeah. Actually, I think he hasn't read it yet because I told him I'd give it to him when I was done. I haven't done that. It is a great book, though.
Now,
It's a great one.
does it lay out the covenantal positions and all that stuff, or?
It's really
Okay.
good. You need to read it. Yeah. It's a good. Although, I mean, you might want to just listen to an audiobook too. I don't. Because I don't think there's anything in there that you don't already know, but I think it would clarify
Sometimes,
for you why I'm pushing certain ways that I'm pushing.
yeah. Well, definitely get it to me then, or just text me so I can remember to pick it up. The thing is a lot of times books will teach me something I already know, but it will say it in a simple way that allows me to communicate it better in the future to other people.
Yeah, that's fair. I think this one could definitely do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is healthy. I loved it. I mean, we might have lost every listener about 10 minutes in. I
Yeah,
don't
we
know.
probably
If
bored
you are
some
still with
listeners.
us, thank you.
Yeah. Both of you, thank you.
Yeah. This was definitely a book of files.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
as I kind of mentioned earlier, who knows how long ago now? I don't know how long we've been talking, but
yeah.
if you're not a book person, we've mentioned audiobooks, or you can watch videos or podcast, like whatever can get you to think, expose yourself to as much information and ideas as possible to get you to think and learn and grow.
Yeah, that's great. In fact, here I'm gonna give a little call to action, maybe, if you will. If we missed something that we should have read, you need to let us know. So reach out to us, say, hey, I can't believe you guys didn't mention this one. You should have mentioned this one. It's a great book, and here's why. Leave us a comment on Substack, email us, whatever. Just let us know. Or if you're with us at church, tell us. So anything else you guys want to talk about before we close?
No, that was a great episode. Beautiful Disaster Fleming. I'm holding to it. I'm holding to it.
All right. You're sticking with it.
You know, I kind of forgot your guys' books. Can you go ahead and mention them again?
Say them all. Yeah.
We need to close.
Yep. All right. You've been listening to the Altars and Ashes podcast. Stand firm, build faithfully, and let your household blaze as an altar to the King.
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap. That was fun.